Hi students! Welcome to a new video tutorial in ICT for Grade 9 series. In this lesson, we are going to look at how to create queries in Microsoft Access database. Let us start by looking at the contents of today's lesson. In this video lesson, we will learn how to create a query in Microsoft Access using a query wizard and the query design option. We will then have a quick test and we will bring the lesson to a close after a recap. To create a database using Microsoft Access, open Microsoft Access, click on Blank Database, give the database a name, and click on Create. So, to create our database using Microsoft Access, we open Microsoft Access, we click on Blank Desktop Database, we give the database a name, and we click on Create. The three parts of the Microsoft Access database are the ribbon. The ribbon is used to provide quick access to commonly used tasks. The second part is the navigation pane. The navigation pane displays all the objects in the database. And the third one is the tab document area, which displays the different objects in different tabs. To design a table using Microsoft Access, we must identify the primary key and select appropriate data types for each field in the table. For example, to design the client's table, the data type for each field must be chosen. The primary key usually has autonumber as data type. This is how the structure of the client's table looks like in Microsoft Access. After designing the client's table, it can be populated, that is, data can be inserted into the table. Creating a query is one of the most powerful ways of analyzing data. Let's have a look at the database of the car rental company that we saw in our previous video on database. There are 5 tables, namely attendance, car, customer, payment, and rental. Each of the tables has already been populated. If we have something to ask our database, a query will provide an answer to our question. Let's consider the case when the manager of the car rental company would want to know how many customers have made a deposit of more than 5,000 rupees. To create a query, we would go to the Create tab and then click the Query Design command. Now we need to select the table where we want to retrieve the data from. We click Payment and Add. Then we can close the window. The payment table appears in the Object Relationship pane. The next step is to double-click each field that we want to include in the query. We need the payment ID, the customer ID, deposit, and total amount of money fields. Then they appear in the area below called the Design Grid. Below the field names is the table row which shows which table each field comes from. Suppose we want the results to be sorted by customer ID. So, in the Sort row, we will click the cell under Customer ID and we can choose between ascending and descending. Next, we are going to use the Criteria row to filter the records so the result only shows those where deposit is higher than 5,000. Now that we have finished designing this query, the final step is to run it. We click on the Run command on the Design tab, and the results will instantly appear in Datasheet view, which looks exactly like a table. If we want to make any changes to the query, we can click the View drop-down arrow and go back to Design view. Also, we can save our query. Like it was mentioned previously, there are two ways to create a query in Microsoft Access. Apart from using the Query Design option, we can also opt for the Query Wizard to create our query. Let's see how this is done using the Query Wizard. Here, we again click on the Create tab, but this time we choose Query Wizard button. We select Simple Query Wizard and press OK. Then we click on the table required before moving the fields that we need for our query to the right side. We hit the Next button twice. We give a name to our query. We choose Modify the Query Design before clicking on Finish. Here, we sort customer ID in ascending order and we type greater than 5,000 in the criteria row corresponding to the deposit field. Finally, we switch to Datasheet view to view the results of our query before we save it. Let's consider the case of a complex query, that is one which takes into account multiple criteria. Imagine that our manager wants to check the date of next servicing for the car having made Perodua-Calisa and which did its last servicing on the 3rd of June 2019. To create the query, we would go to the Create tab and then click the Query Design command. Now, we need to select the table where we want to retrieve the data from, which is the car table. We choose Add and we can close the window. The next step is to double-click each field that we want to include in the query. We need car number, car make, date of last servicing, and date of next servicing fields. In the design grid, we are going to use the criteria row to filter the records such that the car make is set to Perodua-Calisa. Since we are looking for an exact match, it will need to be in quotation marks. We also need the date of last servicing to be set to the 3rd of June 19. Now that we have finished designing this query, we can run it. The result is now displayed in the Datasheet view. Let us look at how we will achieve the same result by using the Query Wizard. We again click on the Create tab and choose Query Wizard button. We select Simple Query Wizard and press OK. Then we click on the table required, that is car table, before moving the fields that we need for our query to the right side. We hit the Next button. We give a name to our query. We choose Modify the Query Design and we click on Finish. Here, we type Perodua-Calisa in the criteria row corresponding to the car make field Then we type 3rd of June 19 under the date of last servicing field. Finally, we switch to datasheet view or run the query to view the results. Let's proceed with a quick test to check whether you have grasped the lesson contents of today. For each question, you will have around 3 seconds to choose the right answer. Here comes the first question. To look for the time of departure of the worker having ID N7 on the 3rd October 2019, the 3 fields below are sufficient to perform the query. True or false? This is true. The query can be performed with N7 as criteria for worker ID, 3rd October 19 as date, and then the time of departure will be obtained as it is specified in the query. Question number 2. To know the address of the customer having surname Jean, the following query can be used. True or false? This is false. The criteria is equal to Jean should be in the criteria row under the surname field, not the address 1 field. Number 3. To create a query that would give the customer ID of all male customers, all the fields shown on the left need to be moved to the right in the selected fields window. True or false? This is false. Customer ID and title are the only fields necessary since the only criteria to be used is title is equal to Mr. and the corresponding customer IDs will be shown as this field is specified in the query. Question 4. To obtain the check number related to the payment ID number 2, the criteria to be written in the shaded cell is A, B or C? The answer is B. Payment ID cannot be in quotation marks since it is a number, and also the field name does not have to be included in the criteria. Number 5. To have the customer IDs arranged from the smallest to the largest number, the query design shown can be used. True or false? This is true. By choosing ascending in the sort row under customer ID field, the desired result will be obtained. Well, that was our last question. I am sure you have got all the answers correct. Now it is time for a quick recap of what we have learned today. We saw that there are 2 ways to create a query in Microsoft Access, namely by using Query Design and Query Wizard. To create a query with the Query Design option, we would go to the Create tab and then click the Query Design command. Then, we select the table where we want to retrieve the data from. We click Add and we close the window. The next step is to double-click each field that we want to include in the query. When they appear in the design grid, we can sort each field in ascending and descending order, and we can also use the criteria row to filter the records. After we have finished designing this query, we can finally run it. We can also save our query. To use the Query Wizard, we again click the Create tab, but this time we choose Query Wizard button. We select Simple Query Wizard and press OK. Then we click on the table required before moving the fields that we need for our query to the right side. We hit the Next button, give a name to our query, and choose Modify the query design before clicking Finish. Here, we can sort our fields or filter them using the criteria row. Finally, we can run our query. This brings us to the end of this video. Be serious in your learning, because dreams don't work unless you do. Thanks and goodbye.